Welcome to the second video in our Sharing Perspectives, where we are talking about the Dyslexia Rights. And in our last video, we talked about the right to assessment. And now we'd like to touch on the idea of dyslexia identity and the right to identity. Would people feel strongly about the word dyslexic in relation to yourselves or having dyslexia? Is that an important thing for you in terms of identity?
Yeah,
I think,
definitely. Sorry.
no, I'll go, sorry.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think dyslexia doesn't just affect how I spell or read. It affects my whole kind of I describe it simply as I'm just wired differently, and it's how I view the world and how I view all different situations. So I wouldn't just say I'm dyslexic in an educational sense. I say I'm dyslexic overall. And I think that's kind of in one in that sense. And that's why I kind of carry that title, and I'd be proud to say I'm dyslexic, because that's the way I think.
Yeah, I love that. Proud to be dyslexic. I think that's really, really important. As I would have mentioned before, I was identified as dyslexic a little later, so as a teenager. And before I had the word dyslexic as part of my identity, I didn't really understand what this difference was. And because of that, I couldn't accept it. And I think I couldn't fully accept who I was. I couldn't accept my own identity because I didn't understand it. I didn't have that word there. Whereas now, being able to say I'm dyslexic, it's made me way more confident. So, if I do make a mistake in my spelling, or if I pronounce something wrong, I can say, oh, well, I'm dyslexic, and it's kind of funny, it's a joke. Everyone is more accepting of it. Whereas when I didn't have that, I wasn't able to say that. So let's say when I was in secondary school, and if I would have spelled something wrong, or if I pronounced a word wrong in class, I wasn't able to say, well, I'm dyslexic, because I didn't know that. And I didn't have that as part of my identity. So I was more embarrassed, and I wasn't really able to kind of accept the differences. Whereas now, being able to have that word, it just really, I think, helps you kind of accept who you are and accept that you are different, and then see it as a positive thing, which I think is brilliant. One of my friends recently told me that you can add dyslexic thinking on LinkedIn, which I think is amazing. And so that's something I think is really positive, that people are kind of becoming more open to, being proud of the fact that they are dyslexic, and standing up for, that it is a really positive thing to be dyslexic. There's so much benefits that can come with being dyslexic as well.
Yeah, I think it's a very necessary word, and it's a word that gives, like, it took years for me to be diagnosed as having dyslexia. So when I think now I have dyslexia, I don't think I'm stupid or I'm this or I'm that. I just think I have something that just enables me to do things differently. Like, I have all of these different parts of me, and I have all these different parts of my life. And it's not just about learning, and it's not just about reading. Like dyslexia impacts every single thing you do from the minute you wake up, even to the fact that you might not even be able to sleep with dyslexia. It's so much of a different thing. And so for me, it was a huge relief to know I had that, and there just wasn't something else going on. And yes, I used the hashtag dyslexic thinker because it's now apparently very hip to have it on your CV. And people have now realized, I think society has realized, that dyslexia doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means you think differently, but you have a whole toolbox of extra skills that you've developed and use that people that don't have dyslexia sometimes don't have. And I'm not saying they don't have it, but sometimes they don't. So for me, it was massively important when I found out. It's like I said, it's like that light bulb moment that comes on. Um, and
Yeah.
then there is a bone of contention about, am I dyslexic or am I a person with dyslexia? So I suppose, like all kind of things, the person will tell you. But I think, like, you're dyslexic because everything about you, it impacts everything about you. So
Yeah, definitely. I think you've been carrying that, I think I've reflected on that before, on my own identity of thinking, am I dyslexic or someone with dyslexia? And I'd nearly agree and say I'm dyslexic because it affects everything, and it's like holistically, like it affects every kind of aspect of my life. Originally as well, nearly associated with that word without kind of learning about maybe what dyslexia is. I think it would have been, oh, he's a slower learner, or that, even the word like stupid. And now once you come to terms of all of these other skills and all of these other mindsets of thinking, is just the other side, and you have to look at the positive sides. It's not to say that, we do struggle day to day, and we're going to struggle for our whole lives in certain elements of society, but you do develop that toolkit that you use and you're proud of. And I think it might take us a little bit longer, or it might be a little bit more difficult, but there's 4 people here, and we're all highly educated people. We've gone through all of our education, college, and continue lifelong learning. I'm such an advocate for that as well, because I nearly like that struggle, but I like to improve myself, and I like to kind of keep using them skills. Nearly pretty slightly afraid to lose them, but but yeah, no, it's a really positive element now.
Yeah, but it is, and I mean, I agree. I love the lifelong learning and all, but I don't know. It's something that when you get diagnosed with it, you then it builds as part of your identity. It's part of you. You can never get rid of it, even though you might look like you don't have it or you're managing it. It's still always part of it, and it'll always throw a curveball in terms of maybe a relationship or a different project or something. So it's always there, and you always have to kind of manage it, don't you?
Mm. Absolutely. And I think what you mentioned there just made me think of the fact that dyslexia is invisible. So it's not something that someone is going to know by just looking at, you don't have a D on your forehead if you're dyslexic. It's something that you're not going to realize that you have. So having that word, I think, is so important, because you can see it. It's something invisible, but if you have that word, and if you're able to say, I am dyslexic, that kind of gives you that power, I feel, nearly, and it allows you to kind of be more confident about it and feel proud about it. And then equally as well with the lifelong learning, I think that's great, because I think another misconception that some people sometimes might have about dyslexia is that if you're dyslexic, you don't like learning, or you mightn't like reading. But I know me personally, I love reading. I like reading stories, and I love learning. Even if it is a struggle, and at times it can be difficult, I still really enjoy that. And I think, it's lovely to see that you both feel the same as well, about, that you do really love the learning, even if it is a struggle. And sometimes, like you said, it could be even more fun, takes a little bit more effort.
And I think the whole word, like, I mean, we identify with it because we have it and we're positive with it and all. But I think when, people say the word dyslexia, it kind of brings some sort of a preconception or a preconceived idea of what it means. And I suppose I don't know, if you look it up or whatever, what's Google, it does kind of always relate it to a learning difficulty or a learning disability or stuff like that. But it cannot be pigeonholed as a learning disability or a learning difficulty. It's actually a life challenge having dyslexia. Because, I mean, if you speak to lots of people with dyslexia, they'll tell you difficulties in relationships, social activities. My God, if anybody took directions off me, they'd end up in, I don't know, Donegal, when they just wanted to go down the road, because I just struggle so much with maps. Things like this, technology, all of these things are not just learning difficulties, they're actually life challenges. So the word dyslexia covers your entire existence, not just the educational journey, although that's where the massive struggles are too. But then if we can go back, reverse back, early intervention, early assessment, the life struggles and the learning struggles can become less, I think, anyway.
It sounds certainly like we're all of the same mind, that the word is so important. It's that power of knowing, as Ivanna was saying there. In our experience at Dyslexia Association of Ireland, we sometimes see policymakers or people in positions of power or in positions of influence not quite getting that. Have you had that experience where people who aren't dyslexic don't get what we are all of a mind around about the value and the power of the word? Has anyone had any experience of that?
Yeah, again, probably just going back to what I said there is that, when I'd say to people, oh, I have dyslexia, immediately they might say, oh, sorry, you can't read or you can't write. And it's always related to education, but it is a learning disability and a learning difficulty, absolutely. But it's not just that. So, you know what I mean? The word is a standalone word for nearly a lifestyle because you have to live your life as a dyslexic and you have to navigate it and negotiate and use all the things you've learned. And that's different than a person maybe without dyslexia. So, you can't just categorize it as one thing. The word is powerful, but the awareness around the word, I think, is still lacking. Policymakers, educators, and general society. And again, there's no blame there, but the awareness of dyslexia and what it is, I think, is lacking big time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think people need to become kind of more aware of that side of it. And I think, we've been living with it for a long time, and we've studied it and kind of researched it as we're speaking here this evening. But I think in the general kind of public as well, it's not kind of fully understood, I don't think, to the same level, as maybe other learning difficulties that people would have, and it needs to be kind of promoted more, and it needs to, needs to be its standalone, then kind of pulled in with other kind of learning difficulties.
absolutely. I agree with the two of you there. I think, 10% of people will be dyslexic, but I think it's so important for 100% of the people in the world to know, because the other 90% of the people are going to be working with people that are dyslexic, going to school with people that are dyslexic. Maybe it's a member of your family that's dyslexic. And if you don't fully understand what it means to be dyslexic, you're going to have misconceptions about that person, or not fully understand maybe what you can do to help them. Or, like we mentioned previously, people can think, oh, if you're dyslexic, it means that it affects your intelligence, or that you're not able to read, which obviously absolutely isn't the case. It doesn't affect your intelligence. It's not someone that will never learn how to read or not be able to progress and do well in school. So I think having more awareness about what the word dyslexia actually means, and what people as a society and the community as a whole can do for people that are dyslexic is so important.
And can I ask if someone's watching this video and maybe they're new to the word, in terms of maybe they're a young person, hopefully as early as possible in primary school, kind of coming to terms with what dyslexia means about themselves, or it might be maybe a parent or a guardian being okay with the word dyslexia. As three very experienced individuals in this area, what advice would you give to someone? Because I think, Ivanna, you said it took you a while to get used to being okay with being dyslexic. What advice would we give to people who are on that? I don't want to use the word journey because that's overused, but who are new to the idea. What advice would you give if you could sort of cast a bit of wisdom into people's ears?
Well, for me, I think understanding what it means. So the reason I found it hard initially to accept that I was dyslexic is because I also had those misconceptions. I thought that if I'm dyslexic, this means now that I'm not as smart as my peers. Maybe this means that I won't be able to progress to college. I won't be able to do it as well, because I had negative connotations associated with the word. And it wasn't until, I had discussions with other people that were dyslexic, I looked into what it meant fully to be dyslexic myself, and realized that it doesn't affect your intelligence at all, that it has so much positive things that can come from being dyslexic. And when I reflected on those, the fact that it can make you an outside of the box thinker, you can be a really good problem solver, you can be incredibly creative. I think look into those positive attributes that are associated with it. I think absolutely there's going to be difficulties, and there's going to be things that are going to take you longer to do. It's going to take you maybe a little bit longer when you're learning to read, when you're spelling, and there is some things that can be a bit more of a challenge for you. But I think focus on those positive attributes that come with being dyslexic, and then that really, really helped me accept it, because I was able to reflect back and say, I find that I'm quite a logical thinker, and I feel that comes from the fact that I'm dyslexic. So I'm able to see that then as something positive. I'm a musician, I love music, and I find I'm quite creative, and I attribute that as well to being dyslexic. So I think if you try and focus on those attributes of dyslexia, it can really help you to accept it then.
Yeah, like I worked with students, and I worked at post-primary school, as I said before, and certain students would say to me before, "Oh, I'm dyslexic, I'll give up, or I'm not going to try." And like, it just annoys me with them. And I understand they're frustrated. They're like, "Oh, I just give up." And like, I'm nearly like, "Look at me, I'm here, I'm a qualified teacher, I'm now teaching you, and this is possible." And I went through these struggles. But I nearly find they still then sometimes they still can't connect with me. They still think, "Oh, well, you might have this." I think it's understanding that you basically just learn differently. And I think as teachers as well just need to accept that maybe if the student is pushing back, isn't doing that work, is really struggling with how they're, the work they're giving them, and they may want to look at alternative ways. Maybe can they record the answers as like audio? Maybe do they need to give more differentiated work to students? And I think it goes on both sides of just maybe recognizing your strengths, and then also recognizing your weaknesses and seeing, okay, well, where can we bridge these? Okay, how can we learn the content we need to learn and understand what we need to learn in education, but do it your way. And I think it's just understanding that, it might be different to other people in the class, but more likely than not, there's going to be other people in your class, in your school, that are undiagnosed, and them will support them as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, I mean, for me, as a parent actually who faced the challenge, myself and my wife had to face it. But I think if you're a parent and you find out then that your child or your teenager or even your partner or whoever you find out has dyslexia, I think the first thing I would advise you to do is forget everything you know about it, because most of it is like, kind of made up by society or whatever, and it's all missed and mashed. Raise your own awareness about it, find out as much as you can about it, speak and listen to the child, find out what the struggles and challenges are, and try and help them as best you can. Fight the school for supports. Don't take no as an answer. Don't accept that they don't have to whatever. Fight them. You don't have to take the word. You can fight, and I don't mean let's all go. Not fight. Let's say the word advocate rather than fight, but advocate for the child, because they're not probably able to do it for themselves. I have to say, and not just because I'm here, but the Dyslexia Association of Ireland's website is a vast web of resources for you. It's really brilliant. Over the last few years, it has transformed and it's fabulous. And then, as you say, there's loads of people in the class, in the room, in your family. Like, it's genetic. So basically, if you have it, one of your parents are more than likely to have it, or your grandparents. Like, it's handed down, so to speak. So someone else has it. Maybe find out how are they managing, what strategies are they using. But I think just support the child, see the challenges, raise your awareness, and see what support you can put in place to help them.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
reaching out for support, and I think, as you're saying about fighting the schools there, definitely, push and ensure that you're receiving, all the supports possible. And a student might be diagnosed recently as dyslexic, and the parents then themselves, might be thinking about their own education journey, and they mightn't be too confident on that either. And I think there's such a vast amount of resources and support there now, though, that both can learn together. Parents can learn as well as the child can learn as well, and to come to terms. Or if someone later on in life, through adult education or other stages of life, comes to learn about dyslexia, I think it's just reaching out and kind of accepting that. And I think there's a lot of emotional, as much probably emotional support needed there as there is educational.
So it sounds like identity is important as an individual, but also could be a family identity, taking Keith's point there. It could be a school community identity, because we've got 10% of every classroom in every school in every county with dyslexia. And also, maybe, do you find that being part of a dyslexia community, if that's the right phrase, is that support, knowing that there's others? And I've seen Ivanna walk into a room in schools and just talk about her experiences, and all of a sudden the children who maybe feel a wee bit alone or a wee bit underconfident just light up. So there must be some power in the sort of community of dyslexia, is there?
Absolutely. I think it's so important to talk about it. Even like you say, from going in to speak to students in schools, afterwards I've gotten messages from parents or even students themselves who spoke to me about how they feel so much happier about being dyslexic now that they know that there's someone else that's dyslexic, and they're able to relate to someone, because I think we all would have mentioned in the first video that you can feel maybe a little bit different sometimes when you're dyslexic, especially when you haven't had that assessment yet. So being able to relate to someone is brilliant. Even myself, when I was speaking out more openly about the fact that I was dyslexic, a few of my friends actually came to me and said, you know, I'm dyslexic as well. And we both never knew that about each other because we just had never spoken about it. And it's great now because we can relate on different things that would have happened in our school years, or how different things can happen in your day-to-day life because you are dyslexic. And I think having kind of an open, honest conversation with people just really helps to normalize it, and getting everyone talking about dyslexia, because, you know, it's not a negative thing, it's not a bad thing. So we should speak about it in a positive light with as many people as we possibly can. Definitely.
Yeah, I really agree with this. I really think that it's something that particularly those of us who can advocate should. I'm very open about it as well. And I think it comes as a shock to a lot of university students, and they're sitting in front of me and I go, "Hi, I'm Keith. I have dyslexia. Doesn't affect me intelligence. I have a PhD." So blah blah blah. And we have a joke and a laugh. But you can see the heightened, and then all of a sudden you can just see the class relax into it because you're being honest with them. I don't know, you're showing a bit of vulnerability, but you're showing them that you have dyslexia. They might have something as well, and it will not stop you or hinder your journey. Yeah, it doesn't dismiss the challenges, but I think people like ourselves, you know, so we like, you know, we look at Richard Branson and who's your man, Jack Sparrow, you know, the actor for the. Here's my dyslexia coming in, I can't remember names. So, you know, the actor, and then we have the Irish actress as well, Katie, and we aspire for these like massively people who we probably never get to. But then we can see ordinary people from ordinary places, maybe becoming a teacher or becoming a secondary school teacher or Miss Ireland, and you know, wow, we all have dyslexia, but we can still achieve whatever you feel you want to achieve. Like wherever you want to go in life, it's not going to hinder you. And then you realize there is other people have it, there is other people who've done things, and there's a massive community of support available also, you know, and that's, you need to make yourself aware of that.
Yeah, I think something
sorry,
that I love.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was looking in that sense of, you know, being, as referenced in the previous video as well, that I was diagnosed at such a young age that I was able to meet a community, you know, at a young age, and kind of grow and learn skills along with them. And now even in my education career, I love kind of coming back and, you know, assisting with the Dyslexia Association to kind of support others, but while also still learning myself, because as we say, we're always still learning, you know.
Absolutely. And just when you mentioned there, Keith, about Jack Sparrow, something that I really love as well, that's also on the Dyslexia Association of Ireland website, is they list different people that have dyslexia and that people might know of and mightn't know of. And I think that really has a big impact when you're talking to students. You know, the fact that Tom Holland, who's Spider-Man, he's dyslexic, Steve Jobs, Albert Einstein, like all these really successful people in different careers, Holly Willoughby, who is a TV presenter, which I think is really incredible because obviously she reads the prompter every day when she's at work. And that's something I think I'd be a bit nervous about as a dyslexic person. So I think that's incredible. And there's people in all different fields of, you know, creative, you know, teaching, lecturing. I think people are dyslexic in any profession you can think of all around the world, and it didn't inhibit them. You know, they're able to become at the top of their field, and it hasn't held them back. To be honest, I think it probably has been something that has helped them get there because they had to overcome those challenges when they were younger, and they had to kind of strive and work a little bit harder in certain aspects of their life, and that's given them resilience. So I think that it should be seen as something that can really benefit you from that point of view as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great word, resilience, Ivanna, isn't it? Because it's something that you really develop as a dyslexic person. But I think you're right. We need to take these kind of connections to the word away, you know, and realize that dyslexia is, you know, it's part of you. It's part of your life. You are going to have to deal with it, and you're going to have to learn with it, and it will not stop you from doing something. You know what I mean? So that's why it's a standalone word that should not be pasted out and copied with something else, or should not be thrown into the boxes with other things. It is actually a standalone thing that affects you for every aspect of your life. You know, people, I suppose, need their awareness risen to show that.
That's an interesting point, Keith. It's something we're talking about more and more, about how sometimes there's words like neurodiversity which are used, I think, from a positive position, but sometimes that doesn't reflect the unique challenges of particular types of profiles. Do people feel the word dyslexia has value over a more general term like neurodivergent, or is there some value in the word itself, or is it okay to put everything together in one box?
Yeah, so that's something I was doing, Donald, actually, was, I was feeling like I was being exclusive. I wasn't including all kind of learning difficulties or neurodiverse differences or, challenges like that. So I used to kind of say dyslexia and then throw it in with neurodiversity. But I think all neurodivergent people have separate challenges and some of the same challenges. Like, we are kind of similar, but I think the word dyslexia has to be standalone because it's a very unique thing, and it's different than the others, although the same in certain strands. So I do think that we are throwing everything into the box, and we say, oh, neurodiversity, yeah, like dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism, etc., etc. So we throw it all in the pot, and then we know it's neurodiversity. But actually, they're all standalone. They're actually all different. They all need different supports, different interventions. So we need the word to remain as it is. I don't even know, like, I don't know if the word is under threat or not, but I just feel that we're kind of in a modern era where we throw everything in together, where it should be, it's definitely standalone, in my opinion. And I've seen it because I've done a lot of research around neurodiversity, and I've wrote some stuff on it as well. And I do think that we are putting everything into the pot and mixing it all up rather than just having the dyslexia, or for that point, autism or ADHD as a standalone as well. So I think the word is powerful because the word, not the word, the word is very powerful in two aspects, I think, of the modern day. Is number one, it has negative connotations, which we need to get rid of. And number two, when we have advocates in place and parents in place and people who are aware of it, then we can make it a positive rather than a negative. We still have the challenges, as we've all said, and reiterated to loads, but I think that sometimes when people hear they have dyslexia, they think that there's something wrong with them and that they're never going to achieve or whatever else. So I think we need to raise the awareness of what it is fundamentally, not just a learning challenge or difficulty. It's a life thing, and also that, yeah, look, it's not going to stop you from doing anything you want to do. It's just going to make life maybe a little bit more difficult in certain aspects. But like, I mean, I don't know. You hear people giving out stink about IKEA and going to IKEA and buying boxes and all. I mean, I can go to IKEA. I buy one of them Billy wardrobes. Probably shouldn't be mentioning names. But I go to a certain shop. I buy a wardrobe. It's in a flat pack. I open it. I put all the bits that look the same together. I take the instructions on the box and I throw it in the recycling bin. And I look at the picture. And then I just build it. So it gives us other skills of that. Ivanna said it as well, like, thinking outside the box, doing things differently, and Dylan has said it as well. So I think us three have a lot of experience in it. So yeah, sorry.
I think the word dyslexia or dyslexic, personally, I think anyone that is dyslexic would nearly have a different definition of it because it is such a unique experience and everyone with dyslexia is different. So I think nearly even just having the word dyslexia is so important because that's nearly a generalization because everyone is so different that word itself, if you were to move that further on to being neurodiverse or neurodivergent, you're overgeneralizing it again then. I think from a sense of community, having it under that umbrella, I understand completely because, there's other people that may relate to parts of your dyslexia with some things. But I think it is so important to keep that word itself. Because as I say, I nearly feel like the word dyslexia is a generalization because everyone is so different in how they present with their dyslexia. So I think how I'd probably decide my dyslexia will be different from Keith or Dylan. So it is really, really important to have that term and not to kind of further generalize that into a wider kind of term then.
Absolutely. And I think you're right, because having it so individual that we need the individual word to identify with and the community to identify with it. But I think also it gets a bit lost because, like, a good portion of people who have dyslexia may have something else going on also. So they you know, it gets lost in that a lot of the time as well, I think, you know.
Even getting lost in the whole of like being on the spectrum, you know, it's a spectrum as such of
Yeah.
how dyslexia affects. Like some people will get diagnosed and will never really have very much educational difficulties, and then the other side of it, you know, you'll struggle with every sort of reading and writing. And you know, I think for me then the dyslexic term just pulls us all together, and then we can relate to each other and share them experiences as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, folks. That was fantastic on the theme of dyslexia identity and the right to identity. I think we've really summed up that whole issue with some really powerful messages there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.